This happened about 6 months ago. I'm Jake, a planetary geologist at NASA. I was thrilled when we found an ancient object on Mars. The whole lab buzzed with excitement. I thought it would be a big leap for our understanding of the universe. I just went about my work analyzing samples and crunching numbers. But everything changed after I looked at the data from the artifact. It began at the lab as usual. The machines whirred and keyboards clacked. I felt good about my skills. But then I noticed something odd in the data. My heart raced as I ran the tests again. The energy readings were impossible. I checked and checked, but the strange signatures remained. I felt this shadow creeping over me as if something unseen was watching. Soon, odd things happened. Some team members started acting weird. I heard whispers about night terrors and seeing shadows. I brushed it off at first. Stress can do strange things to people. But then, I began having dreams tied to the artifact. They felt so real. I woke up dripping in sweat, unsure of what was real. I felt like I was slipping, and then Tom went missing. He was always fascinated by the artifact. I saw him sneak into the containment area once, but no one thought much of it. Days passed, and I felt sick with worry. My gut churned with dread. I walked the lab, the machines around me suddenly deafening. The darkness pressed down on me like an unwelcome weight. Reports of nightmares spread through our team. People kept saying they felt watched or paranoid. I couldn't shake the feeling. I thought about the artifact more than I should have. I kept seeing shadows flicker in my peripheral vision. But each time I turned, there was nothing. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night I stayed late at the lab. I was staring at the screens when a whisper broke through the machines. It was my name, soft and urgent. My heart pounded. I looked around, but I was alone. The only sounds were the machines humming and my breath coming quick. The air felt colder than usual. Then I caught movement in the containment room. My pulse raced. I took a step closer, my legs uncertain. Everything inside me screamed it was wrong. I froze, confusion gripping me. Then I heard it again. Jake. Right there, in that empty room, it echoed in the silence. My muscles tensed. I wanted to run, to hide, but I couldn't move. Light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure, dark and shapeless. The fear squeezed my chest. I struggled to breathe, wishing I could shake it off. But the air felt thick. Finally, I turned away and fled, my mind racing with thoughts. What did we really uncover? I never returned to the lab. The whispers still haunt me. I can't escape the feeling that something is out there, waiting for me to look again. It's been 6 months since that night. I tried to rebuild my life, but nothing felt normal anymore. I stayed away from anything that reminded me of the lab. My sleep was broken, plagued by restless nights and shadows that darted at the edges of my vision. But avoiding the truth was hard. Last week, out of desperation, I met with Lisa, a fellow geologist from my team. She was shaken too. I could see the fear in her eyes. I listened as she recounted her own nightmares, how she still felt watched. We agreed to meet again after gathering our courage, but I had to know what happened to Tom. I couldn't just leave it. So I decided to visit his apartment. Maybe talking to his family could provide closure. The walk felt long, the streets empty around me. My stomach churned with anxiety about what I might find. I arrived at his building. The air felt heavy. I knocked on the door, and after a few moments, Tom's sister answered. A wave of sorrow washed over me as she invited me in. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Have you heard from him?" she asked, her voice trembling. I told her about our lab, the artifact, and the fear that gripped me. I didn't know how to explain the darkness we had uncovered. "It's strange," she said. "He used to talk about dreams after starting that project. I thought he was just excited." I nodded but felt cold dread creeping in. "What do you mean?" "He said he could see things or feel things. He was obsessed." A chill ran down my spine. I remembered my own encounters, how the shadows were growing more vivid. Just then, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, her expression shifting. "Sorry, I have to take this," she said, stepping into the kitchen. I seized the moment. I couldn't shake the idea that something about Tom's room might hold a clue. I slipped down the narrow hallway, pushing open the door to his bedroom. At first glance, the room seemed untouched, but then I noticed the desk, cluttered with papers. I rifled through them, hands trembling. Among the sketches and notes, I froze. There it was, a drawing of the artifact. He'd drawn it with meticulous detail. But what caught my attention next was a list of names. My name was on it, along with the others from our team. Next to my name, a single word. Danger. I stumbled back, heart racing. Suddenly I heard a voice, soft and urgent. "Jake!" It echoed from behind me. I whipped around, ready to flee, but instead found myself staring into Tom's sister's wide eyes, reflecting the same panic I felt. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice rising. Before I could respond, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. The air thickened. Something else was in the room with us. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. The pressure was building. Somewhere in the shadows I sensed it watching, waiting. The darkness swallowed the space between us, pulsing with an unseen force. I knew then, without a doubt, that whatever had taken Tom was here with us now. I don't know how long we stood there, paralyzed in the dark. Tom's sister whispered my name, and it seemed to slice through the silence. Panic coursed through me, and I took a step back, away from the growing unease in the room. "Jake, what's happening?" she urged, her voice shaky. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. I didn't have answers, and I wasn't sure if telling her what I found would help. Before I could gather my thoughts, I felt a cold rush of air swirl around us. It carried a whisper, echoing the word, danger. It wasn't just in my mind. I saw her face pale as she heard it too. "Did you hear that?" she said, voice trembling. I nodded slowly, still grappling with the overwhelming sensation of dread. We had stumbled into something we didn't understand. The room felt alive, charged with an energy that pinched at my skin. I took another step back, but the door was behind me, and I felt trapped. Then, without warning, the lights flickered again, more violently this time. The shadows stretched and narrowed, merging into figures that danced at the periphery of my vision. An icy shudder raced down my spine. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But just as I turned around to make my escape, her phone lit up in the dark, illuminating the chaos of the room. A notification from an unknown number flashed on the screen. The light flickered across my face as if highlighting the urgency of the moment. Against the odd pressure in the room, the screen titled itself with the words, "Your time is up." I felt the blood drain from my face. I stepped back again, catching a glimpse of Tom's sister's shocked expression. "What does that mean?" she asked, fear tightening around her throat. "I don't know," I shouted, my voice fierce but trembling. "We shouldn't be here." The shadows seemed to close in on us, feeding on our fear. I grabbed her arm, ready to pull her toward the door, but just then the air shifted again, and I was struck by a thought. "Wait, Tom had that drawing, and the names on the list," I said, urgency rising in my voice. He knew something. Maybe he thought he could warn us. Before I could say more, a low hum began to resonate through the walls, vibrating deep within the floorboards. The hum grew louder, and the shadows began to pulse in time with it. I glanced at Tom's sister, her face filled with terror, but I couldn't take my eyes off the dark corners of the room. I began to see shapes in the darkness, shifting and swirling closer. "We need to go now." I pulled her with me, but the shadows seemed to hold onto my legs, dragging me back. Just as I thought I might break free, I heard a voice. This time it was deeper and more menacing. "Join us," it beckoned, and I felt a warmth wash over me like a wave, pulling me toward the dark. In that moment of dread, clarity struck. Whatever was in this room wanted something from us. I had to fight against the darkness. "No!" I shouted into the void, breaking the spell as I pulled Tom's sister toward the door. Finally, I broke free of the shadow's grasp. I slammed the door open and we stumbled into the light of the hallway. I shoved the door closed as fast as I could, hyper-aware of the thing lurking behind it, seething with fury. Breathless, I turned to her. What do we do now? Then I saw something flicker at the edge of my vision, an outline forming in the doorway. Shadows were reaching for us again, more determined than before. I knew we didn't have much time. We need to warn Lisa, I said, but deep down, I felt the clock ticking. Whatever was after us was only just beginning. I pulled Tom's sister down the hallway, my heart racing in time with the pounding in my ears. I glanced back, half expecting the shadows to burst through the door, but it held. For now. Her hand gripped mine tightly, her panic tangible. Where do we go? She asked. I didn't have a solid plan. To the main office. Lisa will be there. We rushed through the dimly lit corridors. The only sound was our footsteps echoing against the walls. Each corner felt like a trap, waiting for something to leap out at us. I scanned the surroundings, looking for anything that might help explain what happened back there. The drawing, the names. Tom had known something. But what? Why would he even keep that stuff, she said, her breath coming in quick bursts. Do you think it was real? I don't know, I admitted, trying to catch my breath. But it felt too real. The energy in that room. It was different, like it was alive. We turned another corner and my gut twisted. The office door should have been at the end of the hall, but it stood ajar, slightly swinging. This doesn't feel right, I muttered. I don't like this. Her voice was barely a whisper. I stepped cautiously toward the door. Stay behind me, I said, adrenaline surging through my body. She nodded, eyes wide and fearful. I pushed the door fully open, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The room seemed untouched. Desks cluttered with papers and books, a few dusty plants in the corners. A computer screen glowed softly, showing a paused video feed. No sign of Lisa. I scanned the room, searching for clues, anything that might give me answers. Jake, she said, her voice trembling again. Look. I turned. There on the wall was a pinboard covered with articles, drawings, and photographs. My heart sank. Among the chaos of papers, I recognized something. Tom's drawing. The symbols were there, scrawled in ink. How did they get here? I took a step closer. The board contained more names, but there was one that stood out. Lucas. I felt a chill run through me. Lucas was the name of Tom's other friend who went missing 6 months ago. The same time Tom had started drawing. I reached out to touch the drawing, but as I did, a loud thud came from behind us. I spun around, adrenaline pumping again. The door slammed shut, and the lights flickered ominously. I locked eyes with her, and I could see the terror reflected in her gaze. Jake, she said, backing away. We need to get out. Now. I turned back to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It has to be stuck, I said, pushing with all my might. But the shadows began creeping in from the corners, thick and heavy. Before I could formulate a plan, a harsh whisper pierced the air. You shouldn't have come here. I spun again, searching for the source, but we were alone. What does that mean? I asked, the fear clawing at my chest. Then, without warning, the computer screen flickered to life, displaying a live feed of the darkened room we had just escaped. I gasped. Something was moving in that room, something dark and shadowy, creeping closer to where we had been. That's when I saw it, I said, blinking in disbelief. A figure stepped into the light, its features distorted by shadows, and dread washed over me. I turned back to the door. We have to find another way out. The hum from before began again, vibrating through the walls as I pounded on the door, desperation flooding my mind. Whatever was after us wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. I turned back to the pinboard. The articles and drawings held my focus. The more I stared, the more overwhelming the sense of urgency grew. The names. They're all here, I said, trying to put the pieces together. People who've gone missing. What did Tom know? Jake, she whispered, her voice cracking. We can't stay here, The lights flickered again, plunging us into near darkness. The shadows seemed to thicken, swirling like a living entity, inching closer. I felt the panic rise in my throat, but I had to stay calm for her. We'll break a window, I said, looking around. There was no other option. Just behind the office desks, I remembered seeing a small window. It was risky, but it was better than waiting for whatever was in the dark to find us. Before I could move, the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Help us." It echoed in my head, making the skin on my arms prickle. "Did you hear that?" I asked her, my eyes darting toward the corner of the room. "Someone's here." She looked frightened and nodded. "We need to go now." I grabbed her arm and led her to the windowsill. I fumbled with the locked window, heart pounding in my ears. It wouldn't budge. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, determined not to let the fear consume me. Then, suddenly, a crash echoed from the room with the video feed. My heart raced as I turned to look. The dark figure from the screen had stepped out into the office, its form more defined now. It was tall, with shadowy tendrils extending from its body like phantom limbs. My breath caught in my throat. "Jake, we need to go," she screeched, pulling at my sleeve. "I'm trying," I yelled back, the window finally creaking open. The sudden rush of stale air filled the room, mixed with a scent I couldn't place. I climbed through and reached back for her. "Come on!" But she hesitated, eyes fixated on the approaching figure, which was now closer, its gaze seeming to bore into my very soul. "Help us," it rasped again, and I felt an unexplainable pull, as if it were trying to reach into my mind. "Don't listen!" I shouted, panic surging through me. She finally jumped through the opening and I followed, tumbling out onto the cold ground outside. We landed hard, and I quickly searched the surroundings. We were in the back alley, shadows flitting through the corners of my sight. I looked back at the office and the window we escaped through was simply gone, replaced by a solid wall. "What just happened?" Tom's sister asked, her voice filled with confusion and fear. "We can't stay here," I said, forcing myself to breathe. But an overwhelming sensation gripped me. Someone or something was watching us. From the darkness of the alley, a whisper floated through the air. "You can't escape." A chill ran down my spine. I turned to run, pulling her with me, aware that whatever chased us was gaining ground. The night stretched ahead, dark and full of questions we didn't have answers to. We darted down the alley, my heart racing as each echoing footstep seemed to echo off the walls around us. The shadows flickered past us like wraiths, and I could feel the urgency in my veins. "Where do we go?" she gasped, glancing back at the fading light of the office. "Anywhere but here," I replied, leading her toward the end of the alley. I could hear the whisper again, weaving through the dark confines. "Help us." The sound clawed at my mind, begging for attention I didn't want to give. I couldn't let it in. We burst into the main street, the cool night air hitting my face like a cold slap. My eyes swept across the dimly lit street, searching for a place to hide. A flickering street lamp illuminated a narrow path leading to an old, dilapidated warehouse. I motioned toward it with urgency. "That way!" We slipped inside, the door creaking ominously as we pushed it open. The warehouse was a cavern of forgotten memories, filled with dust and echoes of long-closed businesses. Broken machinery lay scattered, covered in grime. The air tasted stale and thick, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. "Do you think we're safe?" she whispered, pressing her back against the wall as I stood guard, scanning the shadows. "I don't know," I admitted, fear prickling at the back of my neck. I wished I had answers, but all I had was this unshakable sense of dread. The whispers seemed to echo deeper in this place, mixing with the creaks of the aged structure. "We'll figure it out. We just need to catch our breath." Then I noticed something shining on the floor near an overturned crate. I inched closer, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension. It was a silver pendant, intricately designed, depicting a swirling pattern that looked oddly familiar. My fingers brushed against it, and suddenly a surge of energy coursed through me, almost magnetic. "What is it?" she asked, peering over my shoulder. "I don't know, but it feels important," I mumbled, my instincts flaring. As I held the pendant more firmly, the whispers grew louder, intertwining with the background noise. "Help us. Help us." The voices were desperate now, pleading. It felt like multiple people, trapped in a windstorm, clamoring for release. "Jake, stop!" she urged, grabbing my arm. "What if it's a trap?" I hesitated, my heart racing. Maybe it holds answers about what's going on here. We have to know. Just then, a loud crash erupted from the back of the warehouse, silencing the whispers. I spun around, eyes wide. The sound reverberated through the space, and I felt the cold grip of fear return. We weren't alone. "What was that?" I whispered, my breath hitching. Before I could answer, the shadows at the far end of the warehouse began to form again, stretching and coiling in unnatural ways, as if drawn to the pendant in my hand. My pulse quickened, and I dropped the pendant, feeling its energy slip away. "We need to move. Now!" But it was too late. The darkness surged forward, swallowing the space in an unnatural stillness. As a figure stepped out from the shadows, its form began to solidify, revealing the monstrous face of the entity we had fled moments ago. That's when I saw it. It was wearing the same pendant I'd dropped, hanging ominously from its neck. My stomach twisted with realization. Whatever it was connected to the pendant, and now it had found us again. The entity loomed before us, its grotesque features twisted in a sickly grin. I could hardly breathe, my throat constricting as panic surged through me. It knew we were here, and it reveled in our fear. "Jake," she whispered, pulling back, her eyes wide with terror. "What do we do?" I backed against the wall, trying to think. The outline of the creature shimmered, merging with the darkness that surrounded it. "We can't stay here," I managed to say, forcing the words out. "We need to find another way out." Before I could move, the creature unfurled a shadowy appendage. It reached for us, the air around it thick with an unnatural energy. I grabbed her hand, and we turned to run, fleeing deeper into the maze of rusted machinery and old crates. As we dashed further into the warehouse, the whispers rose again, swirling in my mind. "Help us. Help us." They were frantic now, begging us to do something. My heart raced, torn between the calls for assistance and the monster that hunted us. "Jake!" she called, tripping over a piece of broken metal. I pulled her up just in time to avoid a sudden shimmer in the air where the creature nearly stood. Its movements were fluid, catching the dim light in ways that made it seem like the shadows themselves were shifting. "Over there." I pointed to a doorway at the far end of the warehouse. It looked like a potential way out. We sprinted toward it, adrenaline fueling my steps. The door was slightly ajar, a ray of light peeking through the crack. "Come on," I urged, yanking the door open. We stumbled into a small office space, littered with papers and old filing cabinets. My eyes darted around, searching for another exit. "What if it follows us?" she asked, fear lining her voice. "We can't think like that. We need a plan." I felt the weight of the pendant's energy still lingering through the air, even though I had dropped it. It was like an aftershock, pulsing with something I couldn't understand. Suddenly, behind me, a sound broke through the quiet. A low growl reverberated from the doorway. The fear froze me in my tracks. The entity was coming for us. We had seconds. "Look." I pointed to a large window on the opposite wall. "We have to get out through there." It was a risky move, but we didn't have any other options. She nodded, and I quickly moved to the window, yanking it open. It creaked loudly, but it was just wide enough for us to squeeze through. "Go," I urged her as I glanced back. The figure was slipping into the office, a distorted grin spreading across its face. She climbed through first, and just as I was about to follow, I heard the whispers again, stronger, almost like they were warning me. "Help us. Help us." I hesitated, a part of me drawn to the sound, somehow understanding that it might lead to answers. But the growl snapped me back to reality. "Jake!" she shouted, panic rising in her voice. I scrambled through the window, barely making it out as I heard the creature lunging forward from behind me. We landed hard on the ground outside, adrenaline pumping in my veins. I rolled onto my feet, taking her hand. "We need to run," I gasped, leading her away from the warehouse, the echoes of the whispers still ringing in my ears. The creature's growl faded behind us, but the sense of urgency didn't. "We have to find out what's going on, don't we?" she shouted as we sprinted into the street. I nodded and felt the weight of the pendant pressing down in my mind. With each step, the mystery deepened. What was that creature? What did it want from us? A chilling thought crossed my mind as we ran. Whatever the answers were, they were still waiting for us, somewhere ahead, in the dark. We ran, hearts pounding, not daring to look back. Streetlights flickered as we navigated through the desolate alleyways. I had no idea where we were going, only that we had to put as much distance as possible between us and whatever that thing was. "Jake!" she shouted, pulling my arm to get my attention. "We need to figure out what just happened. That thing was it alive?" "I think so," I replied, breathless. But it felt more like a nightmare. She stumbled slightly, regaining her balance. "What do those whispers mean?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "They sounded like they were trying to warn us." I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against a brick wall. "I don't know. But I can't shake the feeling that we're part of something bigger," I said. "Like we stumbled into a trap or something." "Maybe we can find a place to hide." She noticed a dimly lit cafe up ahead. It looked deserted but offered a potential refuge. "What do you think?" "We should check it out," I said, pulling her toward the cafe entrance. It creaked as we stepped inside, the scent of stale coffee hanging in the air. It was dark, with only a few tables surviving in the gloom. I searched for a hiding spot, motioning for her to stay close. As we moved deeper, the shadows felt suffocating. "This place is eerie," she whispered. "Why does it feel like we're being watched?" "Let's just take a moment," I said, trying to steady my racing heart. I leaned against the counter and spotted something odd, a collection of framed photographs hanging on the wall. The images showed a group of scientists in front of what looked like a Martian landscape. The date on the frame caught my eye. 1972. Beneath each photo was a caption about discoveries made during an ancient expedition. "What's this?" I muttered, pulling her closer to inspect the photos. Suddenly, a falling object distracted me, a coffee cup rolling off the counter and shattering on the floor. We both jumped, eyes wide. Before I could say anything, she pointed at something gleaming in the dim light behind the counter. "Jake, look!" I stepped closer, heart racing again. It was a metal pendant, much like the one I'd dropped at the warehouse. But this one looked different, deeper and more intricate, with strange symbols etched into its surface. "Maybe this can help us figure things out," she suggested, reaching for it. Just as she grasped it, the air shifted, a chill wrapping around us like a vice. The whispers surged back, louder than I had ever heard, echoing through the cafe. "Help us! Help us!" I stumbled back, my thoughts spiraling. "We need to leave, now!" But as we turned toward the door, the air went electric, stepping into another world. Everything went dark, and a presence made itself known in the shadows. A voice rang out, cold and chilling. "You shouldn't have come here." I felt the ground shift beneath me, and I knew we were no longer safe. The cafe became a trap. The whispers crescendoed in a horrific symphony, begging for release. "Jake," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Somewhere in the dark, I knew we had crossed a line. And whatever awaited us now, it wasn't just a creature lurking in the shadows. We had awakened something much worse. The darkness swallowed us, a heavy blanket that pressed against my chest. I could hardly breathe as I gripped her wrist tighter. "Can you see anything?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "No," she replied, panic overtaking her words. "What's happening?" The oppressive silence was broken by the whispers, still clamoring for our attention. They were no longer just echoes. They felt like hands reaching out, pulling us deeper into the void. "Help us," they pleaded, overlapping in a kaleidoscope of dread. Memories flashed in my mind. Our chase, the warehouse, that creature. They felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. "We need to find a way out," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, though doubt crawled inside me. Suddenly the air crackled again and the darkness rippled, revealing flickering images. I squinted, trying to focus. It was a hallway, lined with doors, each one more sinister than the last. "What is this?" I muttered, half to myself. "Jake, I don't like this," she said, her voice wavering. Before I could respond, something surged forth from the dark. I felt a rush of cold air, followed by a blinding flash of light. I shielded my eyes just as the ground beneath us began to tremble. "Stay close," I shouted, pulling her toward a nearby door that had appeared beside us. It stood slightly ajar, beckoning like a siren. I had no idea what was on the other side, but felt compelled to take that chance. We slipped inside, and the door slammed shut behind us. We stood in what seemed like a storage room, cluttered with strange devices and equipment. The walls were lined with maps covered in scribbles. There was a faint humming sound, an almost comforting backdrop to the chaos outside. I turned to face her, trying to calm her racing heart. "We can figure this out. Just breathe." But before she could respond, I noticed a large circular device in the center of the room. It looked familiar, like something from the photographs. A shimmering surface pulsated like a heartbeat, and beneath it, a backpack sat open, spilling strange artifacts. "What is all this?" I asked, moving closer. My heart raced as I recognized the metallic pendant on top of the backpack. "Wait, that's the symbol from the pendant you grabbed. What does it mean?" "I don't know," she said, stepping forward cautiously. "But maybe—" Suddenly, the air thickened again, and the whispers morphed into screams. "You have awakened us," they cried in unison, shrill and desperate. I glanced back at the door, fear gnawing at my resolve. "We need to move," I urged, taking her arm. But even as I spoke, the shadows began to shift again. They twisted and contorted, and I felt a weight of dread grow heavier. Then, out of the darkness, a shadow emerged, a form taking shape, towering over us. "You dared to trespass," it said, its voice like grinding stone. I could barely comprehend the figure, but I felt a presence that was all-consuming. We froze, unable to react as terror washed over us. I knew we had crossed another line, one I didn't understand but felt in my bones. Then, the ground beneath us shifted again, and everything went black. The room spun, and I had no idea where we were heading next. All I could think was that we had just awoken something we might not be able to silence. I woke with a start, gasping for air as light blared through my closed eyes. Heart pounding, I blinked against the brightness, struggling to make sense of my surroundings. I was lying on a hospital bed, stark white sheets pulled tightly around me. The rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled the room, grounding me in the present. "What the hell happened?" I muttered, sitting up with a jolt. My memories flooded back. Tom's sister, the whispers, the horrific entity. The fear twisted in my gut. "Jake!" A familiar voice pierced through my confusion. I turned to see Lisa hurrying through the door, relief washing over her features. "You're awake. We thought—" "Where's Tom's sister?" I interrupted, my voice hoarse. "What happened?" "Slow down. You're safe now," she said, her hand trembling as she clutched a notebook. "You collapsed in the warehouse after everything." "Is she—" I couldn't finish the question, the fear tightening in my chest. "She's fine," Lisa reassured quickly. "She's in the room next door, just shaken up. We've been trying to piece everything together." "I remember the shadows," I whispered. "And that voice. It felt real, Lisa. We have to find out what happened. We need to go back." "Jake, no," she said firmly, shaking her head. "The researchers don't understand what's going on. They want to shut down the project entirely. They think it was all hallucinatory fatigue. But we know it's more." A wave of frustration crashed over me. "How can they think that? We saw—" "I know," she cut in softly, putting a hand on my arm. "But it's not safe. They think it was an accident, or that you two were delirious when you went in. We need to approach this carefully." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my rising panic. "But we can't just let it go. That thing is still out there. It's watching us." Just then, an unsettling thought gripped me. Have they moved the artifact? The reports? Is it secured? Lisa hesitated, furrowing her brow. I don't know. That's what I want to find out. But we have to be careful. They're on high alert because of our incidents. Frustrated, I sighed, raking my hands through my hair. There must be something we can do. Some way to investigate without putting ourselves at risk again. As I contemplated our situation, the whispers returned in my mind, simultaneously begging and warning. Help us. Help us, they echoed, tugging at my consciousness. I exchanged a glance with Lisa, an unspoken understanding passing between us. We can't just leave it, I said, determination replacing fear. We need to find a way back to the lab under the radar. Maybe there are clues in Tom's notes or the last reports we submitted. Something that could explain what we witnessed. Lisa nodded slowly, biting her lip. Okay, but if we do this, we need a plan. No one can know. We have to keep it between ourselves. That's fine, I replied, a sense of purpose igniting within me. We'll figure it out. In that moment, I felt the weight of the world against my shoulders, the ominous uncertainty lurking just beyond my grasp. As I glanced out the small window in my room, catching a glimpse of the world outside, I realized that even in safety, I felt the persistent suffocation of shadows lingering around me. The truth lay somewhere in the darkness, and we had awakened something that wouldn't just vanish. Whatever force had called to us, we were still connected to it, and the journey ahead promised no clear answers, only more questions looming in the shadows. Standing with Lisa at my side, we forged a fragile bond of resolve to uncover the mystery, even if it led us back into the unknown. The hunt wasn't over, and neither was the fear that threaded through it all. We need to act fast, I said, my voice steady now. Time is running out, and I can't shake the feeling that they're coming. Lisa looked at me, eyes glimmering with shared dread. Then let's find the answers together. As we stepped out of the somber hospital room and into the uncertain world beyond, a cold shiver of anticipation coursed through me. I couldn't help but wonder if the darkness had truly been left behind, or if it was simply biding its time, waiting for the moment we would reach for it again.